white clock. I can't stop. Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Alright guys, today's episode of Boruto was really interesting to say the least, and it really almost never really had anything to do with the actual episode. It was the things that were actually surrounding the episode. And now I know a lot of you guys, just like me, skip the opening and don't really think to actually watch all the way through it, but in today's episode the opening was a bit different. The biggest part about today's episode is the fact that the Boruto writers are kind of uncensoring a lot of things that they did censor the first time the anime opening did actually come out. You guys have seen on the screen when Kawaki was shown at first, he was pretty much like a black silhouette. You couldn't really see Kawaki's detail, but in this particular situation, you actually do see Kawaki's detail, and this pretty much goes along with everything we've been hearing. The Boruto anime is now on the cusp of actually entering a lot of the manga content, and of course, especially seeing Kawaki and Ao extremely soon. I'll get into Ao later on in this video, but regardless, we see Kawaki in this particular frame, and that right there isn't necessarily the only frame that we do see Kawaki as well. One of the more detailed images of Kawaki that we did see is of course Kawaki in the test tube. Now, similar to before, Kawaki was a black silhouette. We couldn't necessarily see all the details of Kawaki. We couldn't really see anything, just the outline of Kawaki. Now we actually do get to see some detail. Now, just off of Kawaki in this opening, I think that this right here was definitely needed. Of course, we're getting a lot close to actually seeing Kawaki in the Boruto anime. If we're actually getting to see Kawaki in the Boruto anime and Kawaki in the Boruto opening is still kind of blurred out, or he's still a silhouette, it wouldn't really make much sense. So of course this is like a necessary change. The only thing that I do have to say is I really wish they would actually change it when they did actually introduce Kawaki. For example, the episode that he was actually going to be in the Boruto anime, then you kind of unblacken it like this. One of the things that I really don't like in terms of anime openings in general is that for the people who don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, they spoil a lot of the things. But of course, this is something that has been going on in Boruto openings for a very long time, and you can't necessarily blame specifically Boruto or the Boruto animators or editors for this one thing right here, because this has been going on for a very long time. So of course I understand it. Now, another thing, a lot of people have kind of been criticizing the Boruto illustrators for the way that Kawaki does actually look in these frames right here. And of course he looks completely different, not necessarily completely different, but he looks relatively different from what we did see in the Boruto manga. Kawaki in the Boruto manga looks absolutely insane. Kawaki in this opening, the Boruto anime opening, a lot of people call him a lame. I get where they're coming from. The design doesn't necessarily look that good. Just the black silhouette of Kawaki looks amazing. But when we actually do get to see the detail, it makes Kawaki not look as menacing. Now, I really do want to point out, this right here is probably not going to be the finished design of Kawaki. This right here is just like the first thing that we did see, and I'm pretty sure that they probably didn't necessarily put a lot of thought into this particular illustration. Even in other frames during this opening, Kawaki looks different. So of course I wouldn't necessarily overreact to that one scene right there and basically say that the anime is messing up Kawaki's image. I'd say let's wait a minute, let's kind of let it simmer, let's see him in the Boruto anime when he actually does get introduced, and then we will actually make our decisions. Now, another thing I do want to point out, the Boruto anime has a lot of illustrators. They don't necessarily have one particular illustrator that draws in every single episode. So there might be some episodes where Kawaki looks good, and there might be some episodes where Kawaki looks bad. It's similar to what we've seen with Boruto, Sada, Mitsuki, and all the other characters in the anime of Boruto. So that's just the anime of Boruto for you. But I will be concerned if this right here does become a trend, if this right here is actually how Kawaki is going to be looking in every single episode of Boruto. Then I would say now we have a legitimate concern. But until then, I really don't think that we have a legitimate concern, and of course everything will work itself out. Now, another small detail about this opening has to be the Kado organization. We kind of seen them in the original opening, so it's not necessarily anything too groundbreaking like how Kawaki's silhouette being detailed is, but in this new opening we're actually seeing more detail to it. Before, we kind of got to see a lot of shadows from the hoodies, and of course they didn't necessarily want to show us everything, but in this particular scene right here, you really get to see everything, and you really see it when they're fighting against the Kado member called Delta. Delta, previously you couldn't really see her face, but in this new opening you really see all the details of Delta's face, and of course I enjoy that as well. The only thing being is, of course, my fear that people are probably going to be spoiled, and it's probably not necessarily going to have the impact that it would if the anime only didn't necessarily get spoiled by the designs in the opening. But regardless, I think it's an overall very good thing that they did do and make this change. The other huge thing about today has to be the preview for the next episode. In the preview for the next episode, we see our first sighting of Ao, the ninja from the Hidden Mist village that of course has his fingerprints all over the Boruto manga, and of course all over our first sighting of Kawaki. I made a video a couple days ago that we're most likely going to be seeing Ao in episode 178, and now we actually have it confirmed that we are going to actually be seeing Ao in episode 178. I'm pretty sure that's going to be an exciting time for a lot of you guys. One other thing that I definitely do want to reiterate about what I did talk about in that particular episode is I definitely do want to see the backstory about how Ao actually got out of the mess that he was in. They were pretty much hit with a tail tailed beast bomb, a 10-tailed beast bomb, which is pretty much like devastating back then. Now it's not necessarily anything new because Naruto was here, but regardless, back then it was absolutely devastating. Al wasn't the only person that was hit with the 10-tailed beast bomb, and in fact, the place that they're at right now is a memorial because those people were actually killed by the 10-tailed beast bomb. Not necessarily just that, but you guys understand, Shikamaru's going to be there mourning the loss of his father, and of course that right there came from the hands of the same tailed beast bomb that should have actually killed Al as well. If Shikamaru's probably not going to have the questions, maybe Mujino's probably going to have the questions, or maybe it'll just be a flashback and the Boruto writers are just going to fill in that blank so we can actually see exactly what happened with Al and why he actually survived. Now the Boruto episode itself, it was decent. Usually I probably wouldn't necessarily make a dedicated review about this particular episode, mainly because not a lot of critical things happened in this episode, but regardless, we did see a couple of important things. One of the more important things being is the fact that they are actually setting up the security measures around the Hidden Leaf Village, and of course this directly coincides with one of the arcs and one of the situations that happens in the Boruto manga. I don't necessarily want to spoil too much, but you guys get the gist if you guys did actually read the Boruto manga. So of course everything is coinciding, everything is going as planned in terms of the actual timeline in the Boruto manga. All we have to do right now is actually worry about exactly when are the situations actually going to be taking place. Another good thing about this episode has to be the character development of Inojin. I always talk about this, and especially around these times where majority of the time and majority of the animations are going to be spent solely on Boruto and solely on the Kata organization, you can't necessarily have these other characters or the side characters kind of fade in the background, which is kind of what happened in the Naruto Shippuden series. If you guys do recall, at the particular end, I mean, it was pretty much only Sasuke and Naruto, but in terms of other great characters like Shikamaru, he was pretty much phased out as well. And I think that in this particular situation, I think Boruto can probably do a lot better in terms of actually incorporating the side characters and having them have a bigger role in these particular serious situations. Now, I do want to know what you guys think about these developments right here in the comment section below. Are you guys excited to see how Kawaki does actually look in the Boruto anime? And of course, did you guys expect to see Kawaki right now at this particular time during the Boruto anime? And not only that, give me your opinion. Are you guys kind of panicking about the design of Kawaki? I personally am not, as I said before. And also, what do you guys think about the designs of Delta and Boro? Of course, them being kind of a little bit more detailed in the Boruto anime, and especially, what are your thoughts about Ao? And do you guys think that they'll actually give Ao his backstory and show us exactly how he got out of that mess? But it's being your boy Barbie, and we out.
It's a knife.